In 1975, Patti Smith walked into a New York recording studio and tore a hole in rock history with a single line. Jesus died for somebody's sins, but not mine. This declaration was a challenge to everything rock had been up to that point. Before a single guitar riff or drum beat, Patti Smith announced herself as something entirely new. A poet, a punk before punk, an artist who would not apologize, would not conform, and would not ask for permission. When she stepped into Electric Lady Studios in Greenwich Village, she was just an offbeat 28-year-old poet, accompanied by a band of misfits and a producer who had clashed with her every instinct. Patti wasn't here to fit in. She was here to redefine what rock could be. Poetry set ablaze, raw and unapologetic. But to understand Horses, the debut she unleashed from these sessions, we must rewind to the underground where it all began. It's a story of rebellion forged in smoky clubs, of artistic alliances, of personal hardships, and of the ghosts of rock legends. And it all collided to help shape one of the most important debuts in rock history. Hi, I'm Andy Fenstermaker, host of Poetic Wax, a weekly music history series where I dig into the record collection I've been building since the 1990s and explore the history of a band, album, or song from within. Patti arrived in New York City in 1967 as a wide-eyed 20-year-old from South Jersey with dreams of art and poetry, escaping a factory job and a strict Jehovah's Witness upbringing. Her early life was marked by resilience. After becoming pregnant at 19, she gave up her child for adoption. This experience infused the themes of loss and redemption into her early work, and she immersed herself in the city's vibrant counterculture, rubbing shoulders with artists and writers and musicians in dingy apartments and avant-garde galleries. By the early 1970s, she was performing spoken word poetry at venues like the St. Mark's Poetry Project, often backed by guitarist Lenny Kaye, whom she met at a record store in 1971. Their collaboration blended Beat Generation influences with garage rock's raw energy. Think Allen Ginsberg meets the Rolling Stones. This infusion found its perfect stage at CBGB's, the legendary Bowery Club that opened in 1973 as a haven for country, bluegrass, and blues, but quickly became punk's ground zero thanks to the fall of the Mercer Arts Center and the band Television, a story that I've covered here on Poetic Wax. Amid the sticky floors and graffiti-covered walls of CBGB's, Patti performed alongside emerging acts like Television, like the Ramones, and Blondie. She channeled the Beatniks, reciting verses with shamanic intensity, while Kaye added jagged chords. As Patti later reflected, these shows were a testing ground where her poetry evolved into song. By 1974, her band had solidified as the Patti Smith Group. There was Lenny Kaye on guitar, who co-wrote several tracks, including Redondo Beach and Free Money. You had Ivan Krall on guitar and bass. Ivan was a Czech refugee who brought a cinematic edge from his film background and who would go on to record with Iggy Pop the following decade on Soldier from 1980 and Party from 1981. You had Richard Soul, nicknamed DNV for Death in Venice, due to his ethereal style. He joined in on piano. And there was J.D. Doherty on drums, who was recruited after a Max's Kansas City gig. As the group came together, CBGB shaped Horses, turning Patti from an underground poet into one of rock's more defiant voices. Horses is often credited as among the first albums to emerge from this scene, bridging the gap between New York's art rock past and punk's explosive future. Patti's raw power caught the eye of industry heavyweights. In 1974, after reading glowing reviews of her live shows and hearing demos, legendary A&R executive Clive Davis, who had recently founded Arista Records, reached out. Davis was known for spotting talents like Janis Joplin and Bruce Springsteen, and in Patti he saw a, quote, unique and unprecedented force, blending strong female rock predecessors with something entirely new. He signed her just 5 weeks before the album's release window, betting on her despite the risks of her unconventional style. This deal was pivotal, giving Patti the platform to merge her poetic vision with rock's accessibility, but on a major label. Before diving into the recording sessions and the recordings themselves, let's take a look at the cover. No artifact from Horses is more enduring than its cover, a stark black and white portrait shot by Robert Mapplethorpe, Patti's close friend, artistic collaborator, and former lover. They met in 1967, two struggling artists sharing a Brooklyn apartment, and their bond fueled a mutual creativity until Mapplethorpe's death in 1989. The photograph was taken on September 18, 1975, the final day of recording Horses. Inside a sun-drenched Greenwich Village apartment on West 23rd Street, rented by Mapplethorpe's lover, art curator Sam Wagstaff, natural afternoon light poured through a tall south-facing window, casting soft shadows that Mapplethorpe chased across the wall. He used a Hasselblad 500C medium-format camera loaded with Kodak Tri-X film, shooting just 12 frames in under an hour. Only one was chosen. For the shoot, Patti stood against a plain white wall, wearing a crisp white shirt, a skinny tie, and a jacket slung over her shoulder. She had purchased the white cotton shirt that very morning at a Salvation Army thrift store on the Bowery for 50 cents. The black skinny tie was borrowed from Mapplethorpe's own wardrobe. The charcoal wool blazer, slightly oversized, once belonged to a male model friend. No stylist, no makeup artist, no retouching. Just Patti, the wall, and the light. Mapplethorpe later called it an accident of perfection. The image was confrontational, androgynous, and utterly devoid of the era's glam rock excess or sexualized poses. Arista Records executives recoiled at first, demanding a more commercial shot, something colorful, something feminine. One label rep suggested adding a guitar or a city skyline. Patti refused all of it. "This is the record," she told him. "This is me." Clive Davis ultimately backed her, recognizing the cover's raw power as inseparable from the music. As Patti described it in her memoir, Just Kids, it captured the boy-girl thing, simple, true. Mapplethorpe cropped the final print tightly, eliminating any context, forcing the viewer into direct confrontation with Patti's unflinching stare. The casual drape of the jacket became a signature gesture, half rebellion, half nonchalance, that would echo in future portraits and influence generations of artists. When album art screamed for attention with grand productions by the likes of Hypnosis, Horses whispered defiance, signaling that this was art, not commodity. The original contact sheet resurfaced in 2017 at an auction, revealing the 11 discarded frames. The winning bid, $81,250. Years later, Patti reflected that the cover was a pact. Robert said, "I want to take a picture of you that will be on every wall in the world." And for a moment, she recalled, it was. To helm the production side of things, Patti tapped John Cale, the Velvet Underground co-founder whose experimental edge she admired for proving that rock and roll and art could be interwoven. But their collaboration was a bit of a battlefield. Patti craved unbridled freedom, while Cale pushed for structure, trimming her sprawling improvisations into concise tracks. A notable clash came over Birdland, where Cale suggested adding strings for polish. Patti opposed completely, insisting on its raw essence. "I hired the wrong guy," Patti admitted years later. "All I wanted to do is capture what we do. John wanted me to do that, but he also wanted the songs to have more structure." Cale reflected on the sessions, describing Patti as a female General Patton, her intensity clashing with his control. Yet this push and pull was alchemy. Cale's discipline sharpened Patti's abandon, resulting in an album that's messy, yet also precise, alive with punk's primal fire. Smith later elaborated on their dynamic, calling it fantastic despite the constant fights, noting, quote, "The thing with Cale is that we fought constantly. It was fantastic. The thing is, he's intense and I'm relentless. I think things should happen fast. I don't believe in overdub and all that mixing. I believe in doing it right and just doing it right. Spontaneity." Cale echoed this in a 1996 interview, praising her ability to, quote, "handle any situation," while admitting their immovable forces created the spark that defined the record. Patti chose Electric Lady Studios as the sacred site for recording Horses over several weeks in September of 1975. The sessions officially ran from September 2 to September 18, with Smith's band bringing their CBGB honed energy into the studio. However, the early days were rocky. The group's instruments were damaged from constant gigs, causing them to sound out of tune and awful at first, until Cale arranged for new gear to get things back on track. Built by Jimi Hendrix in 1970, just before his death, for Smith, Electric Lady Studios was cosmic. She felt Hendrix's presence lingering in the walls, a spiritual endorsement from one of her idols. Patti recounted dreaming of Hendrix the night before the sessions began, interpreting it as a blessing. Quote, "I was aware of his death while recording," she later said, noting how his energy infused the album's raw power. This choice elevated Horses from a debut to a ritual, bridging rock's past with its future. But Smith's connection to the studio ran quite a bit deeper. She had actually met Hendrix there during its opening party on August 26, 1970, where he hosted an event that drew luminaries like Steve Paul and Johnny Winter. As a young artist, she wandered into the festivities, encountered Hendrix in a brief, memorable exchange that left a lasting impression. This fueled her sense of the space as hallowed ground, which was captured in the final track, Elegy. More on that song coming up. With the raw energy of New York's punk underground captured under John Cale's watchful eye at Electric Lady Studios, Patti Smith and her band transformed poetry, dreams, and tributes into 9 tracks. Each song on Horses tells its own story, not just lyrically, but in the heated sessions where improvisation clashed with structure, personal visions met rock mythology, and the ghosts of icons like Jimi Hendrix and Jim Morrison loomed large. Let's dive track by track, mostly, into the recording tales that shaped this revolutionary debut, exposing how chaos became art. The opener, Gloria, in 2 parts, merges Smith's 1970 poem, Oath, starting with the iconic line mentioned in the beginning, "Jesus died for somebody's sins, but not mine," with a punk-infused cover of Van Morrison's 1964 hit, originally by Them. The band recorded a gloriously cathartic, punky version during their first session, starting at around midnight and wrapping at about 8 a.m. the next morning. This version honored 1960s rock while signaling punk's future. Guitarist Lenny Kaye later reflected that the group felt connected to the past they celebrated, yet as harbingers of change. A February 6, 1975 demo at RCA Studios captured an early take, vibrant and half-chanted, but without the album's false start and blitzing reprise, ending much more abruptly. Next, Redondo Beach was inspired by a tragic lesbian relationship and a post-argument suicide. This track set somber lyrics to an upbeat reggae beat, a cross-pollination of styles reflecting the era's musical experimentation. It was laid down in the same overnight session as Gloria, thus completing 2 songs on day 1. An earlier demo from May of 1975 at A1 Studios, run by Atlantic co-founder Herb Abramson, featured more swagger and Jamaican dub elements in Ivan Krall's bass than the polished album version produced by Cale. Another demo from February of 1975 at RCA also exists, showing the song's full evolution. Birdland is based on Peter Reich's memoir, A Book of Dreams, which was about his father Wilhelm Reich's death and UFO visions. At a whopping 9 minutes and 15 seconds, it started as a short poem but expanded through studio improvisation encouraged by Cale. Sessions were grueling, running from about 5 a.m. to 11 p.m. and then resuming at noon and on until 6 a.m., pushing the band to disassemble and rebuild the tracks. Smith later said Cale drove her so nuts that she delivered this transcendent 9-minute cut, surpassing her prior work. An alternate take 2 from Electric Lady is a bit shorter, a little more intense, with Smith sticking to the edited text and showing a bit of impatience. The album version captures grief evolving into escape via wah-wah guitar and doo-wop scatting. Kimberly is named after Smith's sister and features religious ponderings. This track was a present for her sibling. Then there's Break It Up, which was co-written by television's Tom Verlaine, who added soaring guitar lines. The song stems from Smith's dream of Jim Morrison as an angel with stone wings. She cried for him to break it up, inspiring the title. Set at Morrison's grave, it pays homage to rock idols. And throughout the album, you hear hints of the sound that television would put on display in their groundbreaking 1977 debut, Marquee Moon. But tensions flared during the sessions. Verlaine and Smith's then boyfriend, Alan Lanier of Blue Oyster Cult, clashed creatively, leading to a physical fight on the final day. Now, clashes were common for Verlaine, something I detailed in the story of television's clash with the legendary Brian Eno during an early Marquee Moon demo session. Land, or Horses, Land of a Thousand Dances, improvises on Chris Kenner's A Land of a Thousand Dances, and it was fully improvised in the studio. The opening Horses section named the album. It fuses teen tragedy, Burroughs-inspired cut-ups, and rock mythology, invoking Arthur Rimbaud, and referencing beautiful sexual male Johnny from Burroughs' The Wild Boys. The band read Smith's vocal moods, soaring into this empathetic stampede. Like Birdland, it clocks over 9 minutes, blending spoken word with beats for a trance-like ritual. And finally, there's the album's sparse closer, Elegy, which was co-written with Alan Lanier, who contributed guitar on the track. This was recorded on the final day of the session, September 18, which also coincided as the 5th anniversary of Jimi Hendrix's death. It serves as a requiem for him and other lost icons like Jim Morrison of The Doors, Brian Jones of the Rolling Stones, and Janis Joplin. Over time, Elegy has also become a roll call for Smith's own losses, including Alan himself, her husband, Fred Sonic Smith, and eventually even Mapplethorpe, who tragically passed from HIV and AIDS in 1989. The track nods to Hendrix's 1983, A Merman I Should Turn to Be, and Alan and Tom's final day fight added to the charged vibe you hear on the track. Before digging into the album's legacy, I want to give a quick shout out to some of my channel members. You can sign up today and get early access to new videos and support the channel for just $2 a month. Or if you enjoyed this video, you can give a one-time super thanks tip. Throughout Horses, Patti Smith's lyrics pulse with literary ghosts. Obsessed with Rimbaud, she pilgrimaged to his French hometown in 1973, invoking his rebellious prophecy throughout Horses. William Burroughs' experimental style informs the album's fragmented narratives. And then there's Bob Dylan and the beats echoing through its rhythmic urgency. But Horses also pays homage to her rock pantheon, Jimi Hendrix's innovation, Jim Morrison's shamanism, Keith Richards' riff-driven edge, and of course, the Velvet Underground's art rock fusion. As Patti put it, Horses was 3-chord rock merged with the power of the word, elevating punk to literature while nodding to the 1960s rock standards that inspired adaptations like Gloria and Land. Still, Smith saw the album as future-oriented, less a nostalgia trip than a bold step forward. In 1975, female rockers were often sidelined as folk troubadours or glam objects. Patti demolished all of that, presenting as an androgynous artist in the album cover and in her day-to-day life, equal to any male icon. Her snarling delivery and disregard for gender norms paved the way for future generations, from PJ Harvey to Courtney Love. In that regard, Horses wasn't women's music. It was universal rebellion, influencing the punk explosion. Upon release, critics hailed it as revolutionary. Rolling Stone called it an extraordinary album, one of the first records of punk. Lester Bangs proclaimed it the future of rock. Mainstream radio shunned its weirdness, obviously, but that only amplified its cult status. Horses has since been inducted into the National Recording Registry and ranks among the greatest albums ever. Patti reflected, quote, "When we recorded Horses, I hoped to communicate with like minds, the misfits, disenfranchised, those scraping away off the beaten track." In 1975, Horses arrived quietly, yet it detonated everything that followed. It was more than just a debut. It was a manifesto carved in sound, forged in New York's underground, framed by Mapplethorpe's unflinching lens, haunted by the ghost of Jimi Hendrix, sharpened by John Cale's discipline, and electrified by a band that believed poetry could roar. 50 years on, it still burns, challenging us to shed expectations and claim our voice. It doesn't whisper from the past. It charges forward to the future. Patti Smith didn't just open a door for women in rock. or for poets in punk, or for misfits everywhere. She kicked it off the fucking hinges.